Newcastle United are making secret moves. So from revealing a massive €40 million agreed deal, to discussing the update on Abdi Ezalzouli's potential move to Newcastle United. Plus, what did David Ornstein reveal on Newcastle potentially signing James Trafford? As per, join us as we'll break it all down and discuss the latest Newcastle United transfer news.
Let's go!
So starting off, Newcastle United's midfield rebuild appears to be gathering serious momentum, with the club now closing in on another exciting young talent. According to RMC Sports' Fabrice Hawkins, Newcastle have agreed a deal worth just over €40 million, or £34 million, with Monaco for Aladji Bamba, with the 20-year-old now travelling to Tyneside for his medical ahead of signing a long-term contract. The story quickly gained further credibility when the Telegraph's Luke Edwards also confirmed that Bamba is flying to Newcastle for his medical, suggesting the move is now in its final stages. If completed, this would become another significant statement from Newcastle's recruitment team. Following the arrivals of Bazumana Toure, Sean Steur and Ewan Jawen, Bamba would represent the club's latest investment in elite young talent, but unlike Steur, he looks capable of competing for first-team football immediately. His arrival also makes perfect sense tactically. Since Sandro Tonali's departure to Tottenham, Newcastle have been heavily linked with defensive-minded midfielders. That points towards Eddie Howe potentially reshaping his midfield by introducing a more natural holding midfielder, capable of protecting the defense while allowing more creative players greater freedom further forward. Bamba certainly fits that profile. The Monaco midfielder featured 28 times in all competitions last season, primarily operating as a defensive midfielder, although his ability to also play as a central midfielder and even on the left demonstrates the versatility Newcastle increasingly seem to value when identifying transfer targets. At just 20 years old, there is also considerable room for development. That combination of youth, athleticism, and tactical flexibility has become a recurring theme throughout Newcastle's recruitment this summer. Perhaps the biggest surprise is how quickly the deal has emerged. Much like Sean Steur's transfer, Bamba's name was barely mentioned before reports suddenly appeared claiming an agreement had already been reached. Newcastle's recruitment department has shown a growing ability to conduct negotiations quietly before moving decisively once an opportunity presents itself. There is, however, another layer to this deal. Even if Bruno Guimaraes ultimately remains at St. James's Park, Newcastle were always expected to strengthen their midfield following Tonali's exit. If Bruno were also to leave later in the window, bringing Bamba in early would at least provide Eddie Howe with another quality option before any further departures. The timing therefore feels important. Newcastle have been criticized earlier this summer for missing out on targets such as Victor Munoz and Johan Manzambi after allowing negotiations to drag on. This move appears very different. The club have identified their player, agreed a fee quickly, and now seem close to completing the transfer before rival clubs can intervene. Of course, until the medical is completed and contracts are signed, nothing is officially done. But with both Fabrice Hawkins and Luke Edwards reporting that Bamba is already travelling to Newcastle, this looks increasingly like another signing that could be confirmed very soon. If completed, Aladji Bamba would become another key piece of Newcastle's ambitious squad rebuild, and potentially the first major step towards replacing the qualities lost with Sandro Tonali's departure. Then, Newcastle United continue to be linked with Real Betis winger Abdi Ezalzouli, although whether their interest remains active is becoming increasingly open to debate. According to reports from Spain, Newcastle are still monitoring the 24-year-old Moroccan international, while Aston Villa have cooled their interest, leaving Eddie Howe's side with fewer rivals should they decide to make a move. Abdi has been admired throughout the summer. The explosive winger has a €60 million, or £51 million, release clause in his Real Betis contract, which runs until 2029. That long-term deal puts Betis in a strong negotiating position, especially as Barcelona are entitled to 20% of any profit from a future sale, meaning the Spanish club have little incentive to accept a cut-price offer. Betis president Angel Haro has also made it clear that while the club would like to keep Abdi, they are not ruling out a transfer. He's showing significant maturity. He started working from day one and could be ready by the second week. We're very happy with Abdi, and we'd like to keep him, but saying that a player is untouchable doesn't make sense. That certainly leaves the door open if Newcastle decide to formalize their interest. However, there is one major reason to question whether this transfer still makes sense. Newcastle have already invested heavily in Bazumana Toure, who arrived from Hoffenheim as Anthony Gordon's replacement on the left wing. Alongside Harvey Barnes, Eddie Howe already has two strong options on that side of the attack. The greater need now appears to be on the opposite flank. With Jacob Murphy's future uncertain, and Anthony Elanga likely to require rotation throughout the season, Newcastle arguably need another natural right winger, far more than another player who is most comfortable operating from the left. That doesn't mean Abde's name should be completely dismissed. His pace, dribbling ability and experience in La Liga make him an attractive option, and Newcastle have shown throughout this window that they are keeping multiple targets alive in every position after missing out on Victor Munoz earlier in the summer. Still, based on the current squad, a move would be something of a surprise. Unless Eddie Howe is planning a tactical reshuffle or another attacking departure is on the horizon, Newcastle's recruitment priorities now appear to lie in central midfield, full back, and the right wing, rather than adding further competition on the left. For now, this feels like a situation worth monitoring, rather than one that looks close to developing into a concrete transfer. Then moving on, Newcastle United's long pursuit of James Trafford finally appears to be over after 3 consecutive summers of speculation. According to David Ornstein, Newcastle are no longer actively pursuing the Manchester City goalkeeper, with Trafford instead leaning towards a move to Leeds United. The Magpies are now expected to turn their attention to alternative targets as they continue their search for a new first-choice goalkeeper. It marks the end of a transfer saga that has followed Newcastle for several years. Back in 2024, financial restrictions linked to PSR prevented a move from materializing, forcing the club into the deal that brought Odysseas Vlachodimos to Tyneside. 12 months later, Newcastle again looked well placed to sign Trafford from Burnley, only for Manchester City to activate their buyback clause before ultimately handing the number 1 shirt to Gianluigi Donnarumma. This summer appeared to offer Newcastle another opportunity. Trafford's future at Manchester City looked uncertain, and Newcastle were again credited with strong interest. However, Ornstein reports that although club-to-club contact was made, Newcastle never progressed beyond the initial discussions, while Leeds United have now moved into pole position. If that is accurate, Newcastle's recruitment team have already accepted defeat and moved on. The decision could prove sensible. After missing out twice before, Newcastle were never likely to enter another lengthy transfer battle if Trafford's preference lay elsewhere. Rather than spending weeks chasing an uncertain deal, Ross Wilson and Eddie Howe appear ready to focus on goalkeepers who genuinely want to join the project. That search remains one of Newcastle's biggest priorities. Nick Pope's future remains uncertain, while Odysseas Vlachodimos has returned to Sevilla on loan. Young signing Yuan Zhaoen is viewed as an exciting prospect, but is expected to serve as backup rather than immediately become Newcastle's first-choice goalkeeper. Several alternatives have already been linked. Japan international Zion Suzuki has reportedly attracted Newcastle's interest after impressing at the World Cup, while Robin Risser and Brighton's Bart Verbruggen continue to feature among the names connected with the club. One thing Newcastle fans have learned this summer is that transfer business can happen incredibly quickly. Few expected Sean Stewart or Alaji Bamba before deals rapidly emerged, progressed and reached the medical stage within days. It would therefore be no surprise if another goalkeeper target appears with very little warning. Whether missing out on Trafford proves to be a disappointment or a blessing will only become clear over time. For now, Newcastle seem ready to close that chapter and focus on finding the goalkeeper they hope can become Eddie Howe's long-term number.